man. Hey, everybody. It's your main man, Anthony Brogdon, and I got a lady on the channel today that y'all gonna like what she got to say. She gonna get deep on you. She gonna talk about some of the educational misfunctions in the community, but some of the good stuff too. Because that's what we do here at Strong Inspirations. We give you good Black history. And I'm excited. Let me tell you, I was at a function. I couldn't stay long because I had a speaking engagement. Because fellas and ladies out there, I've been speaking around town, right? And I had a speaking engagement, but I went to something that she was the speaker at, and I was thoroughly impressed. I said, please, ma'am, come on my show. And here we are. I am super excited. Well, this is where we give it to you straight, no chaser. I want these people to intoxicate your mind, not DUI, but will blow you away with the stuff they got to say because they are experts. They're very knowledgeable, and here we are. Hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. It's free. I don't ask no questions. It just let me know you like me. Hit the like button on this video because, ooh, man, you in for a treat today. And then hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up. You get a ding, a shock, a smoke signal. Something lets you know that there's new content on Strong Inspirations. For those of you who have hit that notifications bell, you might have noticed that at 7 p.m. every day for Black History Month 2024, there was a new video. I'm giving it to you. I got this good information, but this is something special that we're doing here. I'm not playing with you, my brothers and my sisters. Did you watch the video I did with the guy who says what the white guy did to us to psych our mind out and all the mind games and how we have responded to it? And we should take some blame for this. Watch that video. He wrote a book on it titled The Enemy Within. And I was like, yo, brother, you ready for the controversy? He said, bring it on, because I'm not. He got the research to back up what he's saying. And I'm sure she's going to kind of give us a little bit of that too. We got to take responsibility for this. Time out for just making complaints and blaming others. And did you see the one I did with the lady who talks about she is the descendant of the enslaved freedom seekers who ended up in not far from Detroit, Royal Oak, Michigan. They're the first. And how her great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather fled and ended up in this small community. And she grew up around nothing but white people. Watch that video. Did you see the one that I did with the guy who he was one day, he was, I guess it was in New York or something like that. He saw some guys coming out of a swimming pool. They had them air tanks on their back. He said, man, what is that? He went over there, investigated, and got involved. And now he has a company called Diving with a Purpose. And they have dove in oceans around the world. And in some instances, looking for sunken slave ships. Watch that video. I got did you see the one I got with the guy that goes in the pyramids in Egypt and says, this is what you'll see on the walls, and how Egyptians developed religion, what that is all about? Watch that video. I'm telling you, I'm not playing with you, my friends. And I ain't playing with you today. This good-looking lady on the channel, she got that PhD thing too. She wrote that paper. Oh, man, y'all gonna love this. Check it out. This is a movie I've done. It's a documentary called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. They did not tell me there were enslaved Black folks who owned businesses, enslaved Black folks who went to college. And some of that is what I talk about in this documentary. It's streaming on Amazon. I took it one step further and I wrote this book. It has become America's #1 Black business history book. You got to get you a copy. It is very thorough. 17 chapters, over 200 facts. I don't add no commentary. I want the fact to stand on its own merit. So get you a copy of that. That's also available on Amazon. But you go to my website. You go to the website businessintheblack.net and you'll get a autograph copy when you order it there. Now you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. I try to be a strong guy. And in my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to the strong sister on the channel today. Come on, lady, please. Thank you for being on here. Tell us your name. Let's get it on.
Good morning. Well, that was a great introduction.
Yeah, thank you.
I received so much information. I have to get your book
Yeah.
and those videos that you're doing.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes,
Because
thank you.
sharing our stories and our knowledge, that's what keeps us strong.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
oh wow! So I learned something new already.
Yeah.
But my name is Dr. Shelley McIntosh, and I was born in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
But my parents migrated from the South, Georgiana, Alabama, and Chapman, Alabama.
Oh, okay.
And so they had twins, identical twins in the South. One of my twin sisters didn't make it. She didn't survive. So the one that did survive, she had to be almost an infant or a toddler when my mother and father migrated up north. So I put myself in context that I am the first child born up north from Reverend Rufus Miller and Ruth Miller.
Oh, okay. You gave us some, but I got a couple more questions in that regard. Where in the South did you say again?
Georgiana, Alabama, and Chapman, Alabama. I don't even know if those places still exist.
Yeah.
But those were their birthplaces.
And that could have been where another generation or so where the plantation was, you think?
I think so, because when I trace back, my grandmother probably just escaped slavery, but my great-grandmother was definitely enslaved.
Is that right? And do y'all have any records or anything? Did any papers, pictures, anything like that get passed down?
Not much. My older sister who passed away, she had started doing a family tree.
Yeah.
And so I'm not really familiar with it. I do know that my grandmother's, my paternal grandmother, last name was Payne. And my maternal grandmother, their last name was Craig. So I'm not sure how far we go back. I did do some DNA, ancestry DNA, and then I did African DNA. With the ancestry DNA, they give you several places, percentages of DNA from several Western African countries. But they did say that my people migrated out of South Carolina, but South Carolina was one of the biggest slave ports.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And so with the African DNA, they could trace it back that I belong to the Mende people of Sierra Leone.
Oh, really? With that knowledge, what does that do for somebody? I mean, what did that do for you to, kind of understand that some of that lineage?
It completed the circle for me. When I got the results back that I am Mende, I think you say it Mende or Mende, Mende of Sierra Leone. It seemed like it completed the circle. So I was excited, crying and smiling at the same time. I called my cousins, called my children, and let them know that these are the people we belong to. And so one of my cousins said her grandmother was from South Carolina, and that she remembered her being a rice farmer. So a lot of people who settled in South Carolina from Sierra Leone, they were rice farmers. They knew how to plant and harvest rice.
That's right. That was the connection. It was the rice. That's right. Yes. Yeah. What if I may ask, is there any strife in the family? Any have to deal with KKK or any of that kind of thing?
That's an interesting question because my father never talked about the experience in the South. He just told me that they were poor in the South, and that he wanted me and my siblings to live a better life. But he never did go into depth about any traumatic experiences. My mother told me that my grandmother left their father. And so she had 4 children that she was traveling with in the South. And it seems to me like they were doing domestic work with her children. So what I got from my mother was, Shelley, they gave us clothes, they gave us food. There are some good white people. That's what she told me. And that is as far. No, there was one other story my father told me, that they were so poor that he had to wrap like newspaper around his feet to keep his feet warm. And
Wow.
so those, and you know what, that's about it. They never did convey any other traumatic experiences in the South.
Yeah, yeah. My mom, she's out of Tennessee, and I hear this so often, and she also was that way. She didn't never talk about it and never wanted to go back.
Someone mentioned to me in another interview that maybe it was so traumatic that they didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
The other part, I believe in my heart, that they were trying to protect us. So my father and mother didn't want to tell us the story.
yeah,
We were children, and there was a demarcation between the adult world and the child's world when I was
yeah,
coming up, and that was
yeah,
very clear.
yeah, yeah. No, no. I mean, we've heard of that so often. Um, as a result of that, do you know? And this is on the same line. Is there some education in your family that somebody, an ancestor, went to school? Because you're a doctor, so are you the first? And how did education get impressed upon you?
Education was impressed upon me by my father, who mentioned, first of all, that he wanted us to live a better life than he did, that we need to get our education. He preached that from a very young age. And he said that's one thing that they could not take away from you. Being young, I didn't know what the they were, but he was talking about white people, this oppressive system. He also gave us the love for reading because he exposed us to books, took us to the library, showed us how to check out books, and told us we could read his commentaries and illustrators because he was a pastor. We could read his commentaries and illustrators, Britannica encyclopedias. He said you can read anything that you want. And so education for me was something I wanted to do because my father kept pressing it. My mother, on the other hand, she taught in the South at, I believe it was like one room, Black school.
Hmm.
So she had the skills to do that, but she did not go any further than graduating from high school. But my mother was very smart, and she was a reader also.
Hmm.
So
Uh, Go ahead.
yeah, she was a reader. When I think about both of them, they were a pretty good combination. She was more playful. She taught us different games. She interacted with us quite a lot on a playful level. Whereas my father was more strict. He took care of his family. He had rules and laws, but I think it was a pretty balanced combination. So
Yeah,
both of them being who they are with their own personality was influenced me. So I
yeah.
tried to do my best in school. Not only that I tried, I did really well in school.
Yeah, yeah, I want to go into that, but I want to stay on that note again. There were a lot of men who went into the ministry. Was that a sign of the times as a job opportunity? I'm not belittling their love for God, but is there something to back in the day? So many men being ministers. Is it? There's a question there somewhere.
Okay. And I can only speak on behalf of my father.
You're right.
So I remember him taking us to church when we were young children, and he belonged to a church at that point. So he was ordained as a minister in that church. Then he set up his own church, Greater Love Baptist Church. I do not think my father went into it for the money because our first storefront church had a plywood door. He had to go in and start the furnace up. So my father got a job at Chrysler, and he worked there for 33 years, and at the same time being a pastor. So he didn't depend on the church for maintaining or sustaining his family. He did that through the job at Chrysler.
All right. How about this? So much of what we went through back in those days, we needed God to carry us through, to keep us sane, to break the stress of life. He would then provide a solace for on Sundays and whatever other days. That was their position. And there's always been that way throughout history. It was the pastor that really was knew how to read, write, and was a pinnacle of the community.
Yes, and so my father was that. He really believed in being a Christian and being a pastor. And the reason why I say that is because my father never used profanity, never heard him use any profanity.
Yeah, I love it.
Right, never heard him, never saw him drink. He did not drink. He did not smoke.
Yeah.
He did not dance. He didn't want us to listen to secular music, but Motown was out, so that
Yeah.
he couldn't protect us from that.
Yeah.
And he never abused my mother, and he never hollered at my mother. So I saw a father, as I reflect back, who really took being a pastor to heart and
Yeah, I
being a
love
Christian
it.
to heart.
Did you ever meet your grandfather? His father?
No, the grandfather I remember was my step grandfather, his
Okay.
stepdad. So
Okay.
I never met my paternal or maternal
Yeah.
grandfathers.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't either, to tell you the truth. Growing up in Detroit, did you know white people?
Yes. So I would say it like this to clarify that more. When we moved to Fisher on the east side of Detroit, between Kercheval and St. Paul, there was a white man who lived next door to us. His name was Mr. Gus. But the neighborhood basically were full of Black families. So I think Mr. Gus was just making his the last stand on Fisher. He was elderly. He must have owned the house. He was friendly, but that's where we came to contact with white people. The schools had white teachers, and in fact, the majority of teachers were white in elementary school.
Okay.
So yes, we did in schools, in neighborhoods, and we moved to Bewick between Vernon Charlevoix. No white people there,
Yeah,
but
right, right.
there were white people at school. There were white teachers, white students. But Southeastern at that time was making that transition because whites were moving out and Blacks were moving in. So when I went to Southeastern, I would say it was maybe 97% Black and 3% white.
Yeah, yeah. This is kind of leading into what you talk about in terms of literacy. Did those white teachers, do you think that they all did their very best to teach you?
I'm going to think about that. One thing is that I learned to read. I did learn to read. The philosophy for teaching children to read at that time was different. So they used phonics to help us to read. So if I'm going to elementary school, and then in the 1970s, they changed the whole philosophy for reading. For the next 30 years, it was a flawed philosophy that affected, to me, 2 generations. So to answer your question, they were using an instructional delivery that did teach us to read, because in the 70s, there was not a large reading gap between African Americans and white students. So I would say, because I can't remember everything in my childhood.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do remember learning to read and knowing how to read. I knew how to read, must have been early, because by the
Yeah.
second grade, I was checking out books from the library because my father taught me how to check them out.
Yeah.
So yes, I did learn how to read. If you ask again, because that's a kind of a expansive question, there were some teachers, white teachers, who did want Black students to learn. And then there were white teachers who came from a white privileged position. But since I cannot remember everything in my
Yeah.
childhood,
Sure,
I
sure.
do know that I learned to read, that I did very well in school, that I made the honor roll, that I would get all A's. So with white teachers and Black teachers.
Yeah. Did they, because you were that way, did they single you out and help you more, or did they try to, because you didn't have white students to compete against, that's the question there. Did they single you out in some respects?
I don't ever remember being singled out. My father tried every motivational tactic for us to get all A's in school. One was, for every A, you get a quarter. I'm just a child. Okay, then I want those quarters.
Right,
And I got the A's. Not that my sisters and brother did it, but I did it.
right.
And so I like to, when I think back, I've always liked to do things well. I always wanted to complete something.
Right.
And I didn't mind studying or reading or going in depth, even from a student in elementary school, to learn. So certain things were easy for me to learn.
Because we hit more of a historical point, what would you think happened that whites did to hold blacks back over the years? What's some of the policies or anything like that?
Well, to hold Blacks back, I'm going to focus in on literacy.
That's right.
So we know that during the time of slavery, um, and them declaring us to be inferior, which is a myth, they didn't want to teach us to read. One is because they accepted this myth that we were inferior. And secondly, they felt if we learned to read, we would free ourselves.
That's right.
And so even though you would get whipped and lashed for even trying to read, we had very brave and courageous Black people who would read under the table, who would read by candlelight. Frederick Douglass was one of them.
That's right.
He was born enslaved as a
That's
child.
right.
And the mistress was trying to teach him to read from the Bible while she was teaching her white son. Then the so-called master came in and said, you can't teach that in to read. And Frederick Douglass said the scowl on his face motivated him to learn how to read. So he played games with the little white boy. He would get a candle and go under the table and read. So what I'm saying is that with us, we have this inner movement, this inner God that sometimes we don't recognize, but that motivates us to work against the odds. And so that's what Frederick Douglass did. Then there were laws that said, if you're teaching Black people to read, then you will get lashed. For Black people, it was a worse punishment. You would get lashed publicly. For white people who were teaching Blacks to read, they may have gotten a fine, but essentially it was a crime.
That's right.
In the 1800s, as I refer to my notes, in the 1800s, between 1829 and 1834, the states of Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, North and South Carolina, Virginia, and Missouri, they all passed laws to prohibit teaching African Americans to read. On the flip side of that, when Black people who could read saw this law, they started organizing their own freedom schools. Black people did this in spite of what may happen to them. So they organized the Georgia Freedom Schools to teach reading. And then there was this pastor named John Barry Meacham,
That's right.
an African pastor and founder of the oldest Black church in St. Louis, Missouri. Because he had some wealth, he circumvented that law. He's thinking, can't teach them to read, teach my people to read. I'm going to circumvent that law by buying a water boat or steamboat and put that on the water, because maritime law is different than land law. And we're going to call this Freedom School, and we're going to teach them to read on the steamboat.
That's right.
So the laws preventing African Americans to read, even though when you have the law there, I think the part for me that really still sticks with me is why you get so many white people to follow that law. You got some who didn't, but why do you get so many white people? How do you change their mindset to think we're so inferior, you can't teach us to read?
That's right.
Okay, so in 1916 though, in the 2000s, I'm jump to the 2000s now, the state of Michigan passed that third grade reading law. And they said that if a child is not able to read by the third grade as assessed by school tests and the state tests, then those students would have to be retained. That's an oppressive law. And so retention of many African-American children, the percentage of African-American children being retained is higher than any other group.
Hold on, let me stop you. You say retain, that means held back?
Yes.
Okay.
Held back. So Governor Snyder signed that law. But he also had a Republican educational committee backing him up. That's why it's so important for us to vote. So you have the Michigan Department of Education, which the governor basically controls. We elect people to become part of that legislature. And this committee of educational committee, the state education committee, consisted mostly of Republicans.
Right.
And they're the ones who produced the law, the bill,
right.
And then Governor Snyder signed it. But there were other states who were already doing this, the third grade retention law. But now since Governor Whitmer, she's saying that you can't retain them. That's what this administration is saying.
Now, I'm gonna go back just a tad though. With that separate versus the Brown versus Board of Education and that decision, the difference between the schools of for blacks and the schools for whites in the 40s and 50s was like what? Can you comment on that?
Well, they were less funded. We know that. They were less funded. They did not receive, I'm going to say, quality education. So we really don't have to go back to the 40s and 50s because the trend continues today. I've coached in schools. I've been coached teachers in school. I've been a principal. I've seen the way or the conditions of many schools in Detroit. So we almost basically inherit schools that white children used to go to when the city was more, I'm going to say, more segregated. I'm going to use that word.
Okay.
So the buildings that we inherit need maintenance. I've been in a classroom where the floors actually buckled, or I've been in a school where the children couldn't drink the water because it was full of lead. So they had to cover up all the drinking fountains with plastic bags. They had to ship water in, bottled water. And just going into those schools really made me feel bad. And it did, it pierced my soul. Because on the other hand, in traveling out to the suburbs, these schools are new schools. These schools have been maintained. They provide a positive and nurturing environment for children. Whereas on the other hand, children see everything in the school. They see if it's being cared for. They see the the paint falling off the wall, or they see that their room is a leaky room. They have to put garbage cans in there to collect the water.
Right.
So I hope I answered your question. Your question was, I guess the circumstances of
Yeah. Well, let me give you an example. I got a lady. She went to and she might be 70 or 80, but in a rural town in Texas, she attended a one-room school. She said all the students, no matter what grade, all was in this one room. Didn't have a lot of people coming from to students. How good of an education could that have been?
It depends on the teacher. It depends on the teacher. Well, we know they didn't have the resources, correct? We know they didn't have access to updated books because many students were reading books that were 10, 12 years old. They didn't have the resources, but a teacher who is committed to teaching children will find a way to do it. So in a one room schoolhouse is basically would be in an impoverished community, in a rural community,
Right.
where many don't have access to job opportunities. They would have to get a teacher who could do it, who really says that even in spite of this, I can teach them reading, I can teach them to write, I can teach them mathematics, I can teach them science, and I'm going to do it. The reason I take that position is because when I think of Frederick Douglass and literacy, no one else was teaching him after he was motivated. He became one of the greatest orators.
That's right.
Writing books and speeches. Then another person whom I hold in high regard is Anne Sullivan, the teacher of, I know I haven't forgotten her name. This student was Keller.
Okay.
Last name is Keller. Her first name may come to mind.
Ann Keller or something like that.
Maybe Ann Keller.
Yeah. Okay.
She was born blind, deaf, and dumb.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
She was angry. She was an angry child. And no one could teach her except for Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan came along and said, I will teach her. And so she couldn't teach her the same way that she could teach a child who could see, who could hear, who could talk. She had to devise a whole new system for her, which she did. And she eventually learned how to read Braille. She eventually learned how to communicate using sign language, where she blind, whatever it was, she learned. And because she had a teacher who adjusted her strategies so that the child could learn.
Yeah.
So I'm saying in a one room schoolhouse, it all depends on the teacher, but it also depends on the children in terms of if they're hungry, if they're thirsty, if they're feeling emotionally drained because of their condition. So there are a lot of variables.
I got you. You right on. What is literacy?
Literacy is the skill to learn, is the skill to read and write. That's what literacy is. So as children, I'm going to go back because I use brain research in my presentations. As babies, we were ingenious. I'm saying before we even learn to talk. So they've already done brain research and found out that children, babies, count the number of sounds they hear frequently. The brain does it. And the sounds they hear frequently will be the sounds that they will incorporate as a language. So a child being raised in a family, say the mother speaks French and the father speaks English, that child can learn both languages because the brain has deciphered what sounds go with what language. If we look even deeper You can hear me, and I can understand you, and you can understand me. But there is no cord from my vocal voice to you, to your ear. Language is invisible. To speak is invisible.
Right.
So the brain, we're already born to learn language because it's all sound, it's all vibration. The brain is hardwired for that, but the brain is not hardwired for reading. So the language that you and I speak, or even a little 2 or 3 year old, what they speak, they know the word man, they know the word brown, mama, daddy, car, truck. They know those words. But when those words are represented in symbols, and the symbols that we use in the English language are alphabets.
Right.
The Egyptians used hieroglyphics. The Chinese use characters. So now if you're going to teach a child to read the language he already speaks, you have to teach him explicitly. You already say this, you already know the word man. When we write it, this is how it looks.
I got you.
So that, for instance, in the classes that we teach, we have to teach children to have phonemic awareness. What does that mean? That they listen, that they can hear the sounds that they already speak. So if I'm going to teach a child phonemic awareness, or to nurture that, I would say, listen, man,
Yeah, I
so they
got
can
you.
hear it,
Right.
right? Then when I write that M, I would tell him this makes the sound of So they have to be taught explicitly
I got you.
to read. You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yep.
And sometimes we don't
Okay.
close that gap, that language. Smart people, smart babies, we learned it. We didn't have a formal class to learn English.
Right,
All you
right,
needed were guardians and parents who spoke it,
right.
and you
Let, let,
picked it up.
let me ask you this question. This came to mind. How does somebody become at the age of 13, go to finish college, and those prodigies that we hear about? I just posted one about a young man, 16 years old, high school, I guess a senior. He got a 1600 on the SAT or something like that. What triggers in them to be that kind of way?
I'm going to go back to the power that we were born with, the intelligence that we were born with. We're all born with limitless power and intelligence, every one of us. But it has to have an environment to help nurture that.
I got you.
So I'm thinking that with his parents, they help nurture that. They probably, and I could be wrong, they probably recognize something in their child and began to surround him with everything that could nurture it. So if you have a child, 2 children, and both of them are born with this intelligence, with this inner power, one of them comes up in a family where the parent recognizes this and provides him with stimuli. I'm talking about reading books, going to plays, going to performances. I'm talking about giving him problems that he can't even solve yet. And he learns how to solve it. Then the brain is making all these things happen. The brain is doing the magic here, but the parents are providing the environment. So they put no limitations on the child. He's here with this power and intelligence, and we have to nurture it. The other child, he comes in and his parents cuss him out. His parent can't read, so he can't support his child in reading. His parent may be engaged in their own problems, their own dysfunction, their own isolated relationships with people. His parents may be alcoholics. They may be drug addicts. It's more difficult for that child to discover his full potential. I'm not saying it's impossible,
Right, right,
but it's
right,
difficult.
right. What is there something to when a baby is in the mom's stomach to reading to the baby? Can they hear that, or is that the starting block? I've heard
Yes.
of that story, or soothing music, so on and so forth.
Yes, the presentation that you walked in on at General Baker Institute, I show a Black baby in the mother's womb. And a Black artist did that. He did it because he said he didn't see a white baby. I mean, he didn't see that. He just saw white babies in the mother's womb. But if we can think of that there was no life there before, and you and I were actually created in our mother's womb by no hand of man, and no stork delivered us. The whole body of the mother was transformed to incubate a new life.
Right.
And within these cells and the sperm and the egg, they both carry information. They both carry information. We almost can't rationalize it, but it's saying we're dividing. Shelley is going to be caramel skin. She's going to be 5'3". She's going to be whatever, my eye color, my hair color.
Sure.
That's happening in the womb because every cell is intelligent. And it may sound strange, but every cell is intelligent, intelligent enough to combine and make a full human baby by 9 months old.
Sure.
So your question was, are we born with this? What was your question?
I mean, does reading to a child when they're in the womb, that kind of thing,
Yes.
make a difference?
Yes, the child hears, it does. The answer is yes. The child hears the mother's heartbeat. The child hears music that's coming from outside of the womb, because everything is energy. So yes, they hear it. When I was carrying my babies, when I ate well, they would move more, right?
Oh,
Yeah, you read to them because the child knows his mother's voice in the womb, and he knows his father's voice. So yes, these things, reading to them, playing what they say, the classical music, even the mother meditating, the mother being relaxed, the baby feels all of that.
Really? Okay. Is there something to somebody smart? I got that. I'm gonna leave it at that. Is there you know what I mean? Is there a smart? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think that's a good question. The reason why I say that's a good question, all through school, I was smart, but I never recognized I was smart. And neither did my parents tell me. It was only when I was in my 20s that someone told me, you're really smart. But I didn't know. I was doing what I do, right? I was doing what I do. This is what I do. So in terms of people being smart, yes, I believe people are born, some are born being smart. Some are born being a little smarter than others.
Oh, really?
But,
okay.
But I want to clarify that. You do your videos. You talk with a lot of people. You have the personality type to pull people in. Whereas I may not have that. I'm talking about,
I got you.
you know what I'm saying? Okay, so you have someone who has a degree in, who's a doctor of medicine. That is that person's knowledge base. That's what they know. Don't put me in the operating room.
Yeah, right. I got
you. Because my knowledge base is curriculum and instruction. You put me in a room with those teachers, administrators, people talking about how do we learn? How do you teach literacy so it'll be successful? Then I can engage and elaborate and collaborate with my own knowledge. So people are smart in different ways.
I got you. I love it.
I'm just going to briefly go through this. This is
Sure.
presentation that I gave on February, this month.
Okay.
At the Alkebulan Village. So I'm only going to briefly go through this.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into detail.
Sure.
I mentioned here that this is my daughter. She's not, she's a grown woman now with kids. But in this one, I wanted to emphasize that our children are born with 3 psychological needs. One is to be autonomous, one is to be competent, and one is to relate. In this one, I'm just pointing to competency because I put her in the bed when she was about 6 months old, gave her a bottle, expecting her to take a nap. I walk into the kitchen, begin to wash her bottles, and I feel this little presence behind me. It's her. And she's smiling at me. And I pick her up, take her back to her bed, and say, show me how you got out. Now she's 6 months old. So she shows me. She puts her little hands on the rail, throws one leg over. I think when I wasn't there, she fell the rest of the way. I call her this. So I call that competence. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, there's something inside so strong. So I love that song because we are born with that. Those are psychological needs to be competent. And for children to succeed academically, they have to be competent in reading. I did some research on the literacy rate in Detroit. 48% of adults in Detroit are functionally illiterate, which takes them away from these opportunities and a quality of life. And that Michigan had failed to teach all students to read. That was researched. And just to show the differences in terms of Black students scoring 27 points lower than white students, Hispanic students are even, they're out-reading us now. So I showed this type of information. The Michigan Student Test of Educational Progress, that's called MEEP. So the state of Michigan gives this test once every school year. And here is our results in terms of students, in terms of the MEEP. Those who are not scoring or being proficient.
All right.
Too many. And why and how. I talked about how reading is taught the wrong way and how it was adopted by universities and teacher education programs, which was harmful. It spread across Europe, across the United States, this flawed premise for teaching reading. These are the steps for reading as outlined by the Michigan Literacy Plan. And as you can see, when I talked about phonemic awareness, that's the first step to learn how to read. And I mentioned brain research, that the brain is not hardwired for reading. It has to be taught directly, systematically, it has to be consistent. Students have to reach mastery, it has to be explicit. So Dr. Siegfried Engelman, before there was brain research, developed a program that taught students to read. And how do I know? We adopted the program at least in 1970 with our nursery children, ages 2.5 to 4 years old. When they started public school, all of them could read. The teachers were saying, what are we going to do?
Before they can read, children must first learn to recognize and say the underlying sounds, and then blend these sounds together into words.
In the beginning, you're training their ears. I play a game, see who can hold their sounds the longest. And I hold, like I might say, in the beginning, I might say, ah. It's magic. As long as I'm touching it, you're saying the sound. Get ready?
Okay, so I showed a video on that and introducing that program because there are long and short sounds. And what I've seen in schools, because I coached teachers, is that they are still not using effective instruction to teach reading. So here was just a quote, and I'm just almost through with this, that if the student hasn't learned, the teacher hasn't taught. That's not a slogan, it's an operating principle. You cannot fall in love with your own judgment. So Dr. Sigfrid Engelman and his cohorts developed these programs that when done consistently, children will learn to read. And I speak briefly about the Michigan Read by Third Grade law. You and I, we already talked about this. Third graders will repeat the third grade if they are more than one grade level behind. And as I said, it was signed into law by Governor Snyder in 2016. And I give some data in terms of the number of children by groups, racial groups, who are retained, and the negative effects that it has on students. They're less likely to graduate, Black and Hispanic more likely to be retained, and the percentage of African-American students being retained is higher than any other group. But psychologically, the competent need, psychological need is oppressed and suppressed. So I've seen children become angry in classrooms. I've seen children who get defiant, who develop low self-esteem. I've seen those who act out, just going to be clowns. And then when I say, read this for me, they can't read it. So children have other defense mechanisms. I've seen children withdraw, and I've seen children get hopeless.
Sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough. When we know better, just look them in the eyes and say, we're gonna do it anyway.
So here, literacy is a civil right, and it takes a committed community to nurture competent readers. And here I was thinking, if pastors even knew the percentage of their congregation who are functionally illiterate, or even if they knew that some of those adults and parents who attend their church, that their children are struggling in school, then it would take parents, principals, pastors, and concerned citizens to commit ourselves to teaching our children to read so that they can have an opportunity, they can have a roadway into life. And
something inside is so strong.
so I just thank you for letting me share that. I just wanted to.
Sure. A couple more questions, almost as we come to a close. How do we reach those kids? And I'm gonna be blunt with my title, even though I mean no harm with it. How do we reach the thugs?
I'm thinking about that. We call it wait time in education. The major event or way of living that helped maintain the Black neighborhoods was community. It was community. It was feeling like the people on this block, we all belong to each other.
Okay.
It was feeling like there was safety there. And there was for me on the east side of Detroit. So the parents knew each other. They kept an eye on children. They would report. They would report me to my mother or father if they saw me doing something.
Sure.
It was more of a community, and more of a union with Black people. And because I grew up on the east side and lived through the rebellion, I remember when drugs came into the Black community and it began to destroy lives left and right, including my brothers. So here I have a father who's a pastor, and who's doing his best to protect his 4 children. But the wider community, the wider environment, the wider society, those who decided to pump drugs into the community, he had no control over that. So we're dealing with community for number one. We're also addressing the joblessness that occurred in every major city, especially in Detroit. When the factories computerized and became technological, where when I graduated from high school, the young men could go straight into the factory and earn a living. Now that doesn't happen. There are more joblessness in the city of Detroit. I saw that happen.
Mhm.
So when joblessness is there and you can only make a living by working, then with the influx of drugs, that became a business to a lot of young people. That became a business. So sadly and tragically, that business would allow, for instance, me to sell drugs to a child in order for me to make a living, even if it kills you.
That's right.
Then the thugs came about through rivalry or through lack of. Especially with young Black men, I believe there's a need, there's a drive for Black men to be protective, to be able to raise families, to be able to say, I'm a man because I can provide this. But when that's taken away, what do you revert to? The easiest way, even if I'm killing you, I'm taking care of myself. So you have community, the lack of community. Now you have an extreme case of individualism, where for what I want, I'll take your life for it. I would turn your daughter into a drug addict for me.
Right.
So you got individualism. Those two are working with each other. Lack of community, and then this mindset of individualism. The other I would think would be identification. The lack of identification. We must identify with one another. I'm doing okay. But if one Black person is still oppressed, if one person cannot read, then I should identify with that and then commit to doing something to help change that.
Okay.
So I'm talking about identification with our own people.
I got it.
So with thugs, some are young, some find no other way out. Where are the answers? Where are the answers for me? I'm a young Black man, I can't get a job. My mother is poor. Where do I fit into this world? To help our people with that condition, I have always thought, and I don't know how you feel about this, I feel if the church did their part, it could be better, because
Okay.
there's a church on every corner.
That's right. I like
And
that.
they're leading people to heaven after death when they should be trying to build a heaven here on earth.
I like
I
it.
believe the church should take more responsibility, as churches did in the past.
I got you.
The church took care of communities, they took care of people. But now the focus is not on building communities or building power for Black people. So
Okay.
it's not an easy answer,
Yeah.
but I do know that we have some power in churches. And if churches could change their focus on doing what we're supposed to do now while we are alive, they may be able to save a lot of what we call so-called thugs.
Okay, let me give you, I'm gonna end on a, not end, but on a high note, how about this? Have you run into a thug that you saw something in him and was able to bring it out, and for him to say, okay, I'm gonna do the right thing, I'm not gonna let me trying to get an education stop me from, now my boy's talking me out of it. Have you run across that in your teachings in school and stuff like that? And tell us an example of, as you have one of those kind of stories, so we can cry on you.
So when you say thug, what are you referring to? I gotta be clear.
I'm using that loosely. I'm thinking of a guy that when he doesn't care about his appearance, he looks menacing, and he commits some kind of crime or violence against someone else.
I'm thinking. I have not run into that type. I haven't. I can tell you what I have done.
Okay.
I was a member of the Shrines of the Black Madonna, and we had a children's institute, which I ran for 21 years.
Okay, I love
And
it.
so the children lived in dormitory type settings, and I was their house parent. Not only their house parent, I was the director of the whole program. I had 9 boys. They were all 9-year-olds. They're living in the same apartment. They're living in bunk beds, and I'm training them every single day as to who they are. That because we're a religious institute, to let them know that Jesus was a revolutionary Black Messiah, grounded them in their history, and also led them to experiences of community and experiences of God.
I love it.
And that grounding helped them to make better decisions in their lives.
I love it.
Okay, so they're grown now.
Yes.
Some of them have made mistakes, but we grounded them with that. We were
Yes.
training our children
Yes.
to make the right decision.
That's right.
Okay, so it can be, I think that was one. That's
Okay.
these group, they're in their 40s now, right? They have
Right.
children now.
Sure.
But this is not a thug that I'm about to talk about. This is a 9-year-old going into the 4th grade. His mother had him on the same baseball team as my grandson was on.
All right.
On this particular day, his name is Dion. She said I could use his name. So Dion is very handsome, little dark-skinned boy. He hit a
Right.
home run.
Right.
So the grandmothers, the aunts, the mothers, we are giving each other high fives and high-fiving his mother, Michelle, and saying, look at Dion, he hit a home run. Well, everybody's just happy. And she finally says, I told him to be good in sports because he will never be able to read. So a little lone voice from that little crowd comes up and says, my mother can teach him. I'm the mother. So I tell Michelle, can you do 2 days a week, 90 minutes each day? If you can commit to that, then I'm going to teach him to read better. She committed to that. With Dion, who was just 9 years old, I did a contract for myself. I said that I will always be organized, I will respect you, and I will give 100% every time you come to the reading session.
All right.
His contract said, I will respect you, I will give 100% every time I come. So every time he came, I said, Dion, what are you giving today? Write it on the board, 100%. 2 months later, Dion, what are you giving today? 500%. As we went on, Dion had numbers all across the board. I didn't know what those numbers were. I said, we have to look those up because we're in the hundreds of trillions now. Every day that I tutored him, he gave over 100%. The statement that his mother made, he will never be able to read, it turned out to be wrong. So his teacher found out when I was tutoring, sent home a workbook and wanted me to teach him from the workbook. Very professionally in an email, I told him I'm not doing that. Dion needs help with decoding this English language. I guarantee you that in a few months, Dion will be able to do that workbook on his own. And so shortly after he got on the honor roll, his mother sent me a certificate.
Oh, really?
2022, he graduated from high school. 2022, Dion graduated from high school. I'm saying the work that we put into students, and even with the so-called thugs who may not be able to read, or maybe we're finding out what they need and where they feel they're lacking, that could really help. So I helped Dion, I helped save his life. I helped Dion to graduate from high school, to make a living for himself as a young Black man. So no, I haven't run into anyone.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I got you. I love it.
Okay.
You proud of yourself? You found your calling, your mission in life.
Can I say it like this too? At 21, I joined the Shrines of the Black Madonna. That helped me to find my purpose in life. Because the belief there was, we are Black, we are oppressed, we seek to end our oppression. And we're going to do those things to help our people. And we're going to do things to help us to change ourselves. We cannot be individualistic if we're going to help our people. We cannot live a slave culture lifestyle. That means escaping through alcohol, through smoking drugs, through selling drugs. We cannot do these things. These are slave culture behaviors. We have to change those behaviors. So the late Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr. was able to tap in on what young Black people needed and give them this purpose in life. And that's what helped me to find my purpose in life. In terms of being proud of myself, sometimes I have to stop and say, girl, you did that, and pat myself on the back. But in terms of recognizing that every single day, it's not that, because when I'm involved in the work that I have to do, it's like, it's normal. This is what I must do. This is what I have to do. And so it's not every day that I say, go girl.
Yeah, right.
But
right.
when I look at what I've done, and some people have told me that you need to look at what you've done.
Yeah.
They've told me that, look at what you've done. And so I reflect on it today, and I have done quite a lot.
I love it.
But I've done it on behalf of Black people. That makes a difference for me.
Yeah.
It does. It makes a big difference for me. So
Yeah.
everything that I do, I've given 200, 300%.
I love it. You have a business. How do people find you, promote you?
Okay.
You
Thank
know,
you
that
for
kind
the
of
question.
thing. Yeah. And
I have-
you written a book and that kind of thing too.
Okay. So if I veer off too far, call me back, please, because sometimes when I give an answer, I want to give the whole context of it. I'm going to start with the books first. I've written 5 books. And so one is Genesis 2, the recreation of Black people. It's a culmination of Black theology lessons in meetings only facilitated by the late Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr. So I had to do Bible lessons, Black theology lessons for 5 years. So I put that in a book. The reason is because nothing else had come out about Black Christian nationalism since 1978, something like that. So I wrote that. Then I wrote Mtoto House, Vision to Victory, Raising African-American Children Communally. And that was the 21 years that I was over that institution. So I wanted to explain it fully and explain the philosophical pillars it stood on, so that if anybody wanted to rebuild it, they have a blueprint. 2 other books are entitled Principal's Tale. And these are true stories, true events, true experiences of me as a principal. I called it a Principal's Tale because I wanted everybody to read it. So one is called A Principal's Tale, Life in 31 Days. That was the first one. That's in diary form. The second is Principal's Tale, A Self-Determined Leader. The last book, the most recent, came out in 2021, and that's Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation. All of them can be found on Amazon.
Okay. Do you have a website?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay, so you mentioned about the 2 business, you mentioned about the businesses.
Yeah.
So Child Focused Consulting Company, LLC. We provide reading intervention in schools and private reading sessions. So the website for that is read, the numeral 2, learn, abc.com. Read
Okay.
to learn abc.com. I wish I could pull it up, but I don't know how to do it at this point.
No. Okay.
So the latest one is called the Niger Monifa Literacy Center. And that really, I started January 2024. I have grandsons, and I only had one granddaughter who passed away at 4 years old in her sleep. Her name was Niger Monifa. Monifa is my African name, so she's my little namesake. I always wanted to do something in honor of her. So the Niger Monifa Literacy Center is focused on not only teaching children, but teaching adults. So this is our addition to teach adult literacy, to teach that 48% of functionally illiterate adults in Detroit to read. So that website is read, again, read, number 2, learnabc.com. And the other website is ShelleyMcIntosh.com. That's my name.
Okay. Everybody, did you feel that? That I did. We got deep, and the lady was ready. This is her passion. You can feel it coming through. Eloquently said, when she wrote that paper for that PhD, they didn't even read it. They just said, come on over here. You done did the legwork. We want you on this side. Oh,
Thank
man,
you.
I've been blessed today, and I know you, my viewers, have too.
Well,
We know the answers.
We do have answers. And sometimes, Brother Anthony, the answers are right in front of our faces. And sometimes we don't see them.
Yeah, that's right.
Rebuilding communities to help those who turn to other ways of doing business, which ends up being criminal. The churches, the answers are there if the focus was changed.
Yeah.
Our strength is in community. Our strength is in identifying with one another.
That's right.
Our strength is uniting the skills, talent, and experience and education that we have, because Black people are very intelligent people.
There you go.
Very intelligent people. And in uniting what we know, we could be free yesterday.
That's right.
We could stop this thuggery yesterday.
That's right.
And
right.
I think maybe I need to add to this is that we need to realize that we live in a system, a world system that oppresses Black people. We have to know who the real enemy is.
That's right.
But there's so many tentacles to this that we can't, like our mothers and fathers in the South, they could say who the real enemy was because they were being discriminated against. They were,
That's right.
Right, they could see, and they all agreed who it was.
That's
But
right.
in today's world, we don't all agree who the real enemy is,
That's
not
right.
Black
That's
people.
right. That's
And
right.
that's a point of confusion.
That's
so
right.
in the world system set up by very powerful Europeans, even some South American leaders, some European leaders, they've created a world system where it's very difficult to function in.
That's right.
But we don't know it. We don't know about it. So we blame ourselves for a lot of things when we should be looking at the world system.
That's
In
right.
contrast, that is a divine system, which God has created.
That's
Where
right.
the trees are going to replace themselves, where the
That's right.
oranges and apples, they will come back every year.
That's
Where
right.
there's air for us to breathe,
That's right.
where there's water for us to drink. This is a divine harmonious system. But man created a system that's not in complementary status with the
That's
divine
right.
system. And
That's
that
right.
needs to change too.
That's the last word, everybody.
Last word, yes.
That's the last word, everybody. Well put. I got nothing to add to that. You hear me, folk? I got nothing to add to that. So eloquently said. And we will get there one day. That is the prayer. I thank you for coming on Strong Inspirations. Everybody hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. There is no love button. If there was, I know you hit it. Hit the notifications bell. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. Don't keep it to yourself, my brothers and our sisters. Let this thing flow. And then go to her website. All that will be in the description. Support her. We're going to have her talk more. She's on a mission, and there people around the world need to hear this other than on Strong Inspiration. Watch, there's bigger plans for you, my sister.
Thank you.
There's no question about it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being an inspiration.
Yeah, everybody hit my website, check my book out and everything like that too. And I say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love who you become. You felt that in you. You read them books. You became smarter than the rest of them kids. You outcompeted all them other folks. and now you are, because you took a chance one day and walked into the school, the shrine, and it developed you even more. You gave your life to help people.
Yeah.
It's an angel type thing going in front of me, everybody. That's what it looks like.
Thank you.
That's what it looks like for strangers. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. We out.
Thank you.
Thank you.